Is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back. We are about 15 minutes a bit late because I was finishing up on some both prep and then some, a review for somebody. So, but yeah, it's good to be here. I think, I don't know if it's a happy Sunday evening or it's been that kind of day for us. It's been quite rainy and a bit cold. Some sparks of sunshine here and there, but perhaps not enough to get the ground in the clear. And it wrapped up with another downpour in the evening, quite a heavy one that had me rushing out for that had me rushing out before the conclusion of the Arsenal game. In fact, I had to check online to watch Victor Yokeres's second goal because by the time he scores that second goal, I've already exited. My watch area just to that out because of the brains, and basically that's what it was. I hope you've had a wonderful Sunday, as I did. Arsenal dominating the North London derby, and then you question, where was this kind of Arsenal performance when they were up against Wolverhampton Wanderers at Molineux or midweek? But it's typical of Arsenal. Somebody said, and I thought it was such an interesting quote. Arsenal are their best enemies and their best friends. In other words, they'll do things that will help them, but they will also do things that will sabotage them. In any case, this very much was no different from the exhibition of that, as perhaps we will see later on. Barcelona over in Spain, closing to a 3-0 victory, I think against Levante in that one. And then Liverpool having to squirm it away very, very late on against Nottingham Forest. They managed to win that game by a goal to nil, thanks to Alexis McAllister, who had earlier on scored off a deflected, clearance by Ola Aina, and then that goal was ruled out for a handball, and then he somehow managed to cash in the goods before the final whistle would be blown, and so much so to the disappointment, of course, of Vitor Pereira, the Wolverhampton Wanderers manager, the Nottingham Forest manager, who had hoped for perhaps a more decent start than the one he got at the City Stadium, in comparison to what he had managed to do or to guide his team through when they made the trip to Fenerbahce over in Turkey in midweek during their first leg playoff of the UEFA Europa League. So, for those of you that are just joining us, my name is Robert Kesakos. Kindly like the broadcast and consider subscribing to the channel. Otherwise, it's a big pleasure to have you around. I hope you enjoy the discussion tonight. As the case often is, we'll rotate our discussion around, Arsenal's performance. We'll look at Liverpool. We'll look at Crystal Palace, and then we'll get to all the other games, but and then the reaction, but then and all things in that regard, and perhaps we'll veer away from the Premier League. But if you're just joining us, kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel. Let me know where you're joining us from. I'll be reading all your comments. I'll be reacting to them. Let me know what you made of that Arsenal performance, and whether you think it sort of gives them another fighting chance in their pursuit for glory, or it is just a smoke screen, because next weekend they have another very tough fixture, and should they drop points in that one, then we'll be back to where we started off. And then not forgetting that Man City have a game in hand compared to the Gunners, who have restored the cushion that they had, which is the 5 points cushion prior to the start of officially of match day 27. So let me know what your thoughts are in that regard. But on that point, let me put up a poll question here quickly. Does the North London derby victory put Arsenal back in position to win the Premier League? So yes, you could say yes, you could say no, you could say I'm not sure. So those will be the answers that you can rely on. So Let me know what your thoughts are. Um, let me know what your answers are for that. So, anyways, guys, where do we start it all? Where do we start it all? Do we start with Liverpool? Do we start with Arsenal? You let me know. You decide. But in my view, I begin with where it burnt the hottest, and that was in the North London derby. Quite the kind of performance, quite the kind of reaction that Arsenal fans would have demanded of their team, that those players would have demanded of themselves, that Mikel Arteta and his coaching staff would have demanded of their players to have that kind of reaction, given what transpired on Wednesday when they squandered a 2-0 lead to drop 2 points, very significant points against Wolverhampton Wanderers, which put back Manchester City in pole position for the Premier League title in terms of having a bigger say in their own destiny, because as it stands, the mathematics is simple. Man City simply have to win all their remaining games and the Premier League title will be theirs. Arsenal, on the other side, have the same task. They have to win all their remaining Premier League games for the title to be theirs. Now, whereas it is a possibility that both teams may not be perfect, because for starters, both teams cannot be perfect. The reason for that is they have a fixture to play against each other, and that will come on the April the 18th. But should there be a stumble for one, or even both, one would be hoping that one is much bigger. For example, if you draw a game, you'd hope that your opponent loses instead of them drawing or winning. So that it's going to be the kind of prayer that I'm sure perhaps Arsenal fans or Man City fans will have, depending on what side of the aisle you fall under or you fall on. So that should be the expectation. But speaking of the reaction, I think that's what you have. For the first time, and I say this without fear of contradiction, having watched a good number of chunk of minutes from Victor Gyökeres in an Arsenal shirt, in my opinion, this is the best game I've seen him play. This is the best I've seen him play in an Arsenal jersey. I remember his performance against Newcastle away from home. Brilliant performance. Where is it? We will Iwonga. Hi, how are you doing? Where are you joining us from? Apologies if I mispronounce your name. Kindly indulge me on that one. So, I mean, like I said, I've watched Victor Gyökeres on a given number of occasions, on games where I thought he had a good performance, on games where I thought he had an okay performance, on a game where I thought he had a brilliant performance. But for me today, this was more than brilliant. It's the kind of man of the match performance that you expect from, your prize striker. And he lived to that expectation. He lived to the billing. He scored 2 goals. But beyond scoring 2 goals, I thought he dragged those defenders. When you watch some of those Arsenal goals, it's because of his presence on the pitch. And it's an argument that I've held long, that he's still on the pitch, whether he's scored or not, whether he's had a good game or not. Usually, it gives Arsenal that bit of extra. That's something, because he drags the attention of the centre backs. And today, when you look at Arsenal's first goal, it was typical of that, because the 2 centre backs in Rodri Dragsson and Mickey van der Ven are preoccupied by his presence in that box, that when Bukayo Saka makes the cutback to meet Ebeleche Eze, by the time Rodri Dragsson switches his attention away from Victor Gyökeres to then catch sight of Ebeleche Eze, it's just a second too late for him to put in the block that he would have needed to deflect perhaps that attempt on goal, and Arsenal scored to get in the lead. So, but before we even get into what really happened on the pitch, for me, 1, I like the reaction. 2, it was not a perfect performance from the Arsenal, as we will see, because while the result will read 4-1, I think that game could have easily been, the scoreline could have easily been much different, and not so much in the favor of Arsenal in terms of the final score. Perhaps one would argue, it could have been much better for the Arsenal. It depends on how you slice the argument. But before we get into that, we all saw what happened against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Led the game by 2 goals to 0. Wolves came back and drew that game 2-2. Everybody said they've bottled it. And just winning this game doesn't mean they have it. It doesn't mean that then Arsenal are going to win it. Because just like the poll poll question, sorry, just like the poll question does, ask, and guys, kindly, do your best to respond to that. Do you think that, Arsenal's victory, the North London Derby victory, puts Arsenal in pole position, whether it puts Arsenal in pole position to sort of go ahead and win the Premier League title? Certainly, in my opinion, I do not think so, because it's not a given. Like I said, they have 10 games left to play. Man City have 11 games to play. If Man City win all their games, including beating up against Arsenal, then the title race is good as done. Congratulations to Man City. You walk away with the Premier League title, which would be the 7th in 10 seasons for Pep Guardiola. On the other hand, if Arsenal can be perfect in their remaining 10 games, that means they end up with another 30 points, which probably, given the results from today's game, puts them in about 90 points or 91 points. Let's have a look at that. Yes, at 91 points, if they were to be perfect in their remaining 10 games. So then, we would say congratulations to the Arsenal. Then it would imply that they have won their first Premier League title in 22 years. So really, the dynamics are in that shape, and they are that simple. So because if Man City play that one game in hand that they have, which is against Crystal Palace, a date is yet to be found to have it rescheduled, because it's essentially, I think it's supposed to be a game for match day 31, because on the 22nd of March, when that game is supposed to be played, that's when Arsenal and Man City are supposed to face each other in the EFL Cup finals at Wembley. So if Man City were to play that game against Crystal Palace, let's assume they win it. They go back to being within 2 points behind Arsenal, and then both teams have 10 games are left to play. So whoever does the better out of those two is the one that carries the day, regardless of whether you lose some and win some and draw some. But the best case scenario for Arsenal would be winning all of them. The best case scenario for Man City would be the same. Now, let's get into the actual game today. One, I thought an impressive performance from Victor Gyökeres, an impressive performance from Eberechi Eze. I think that's as good a performance that I've seen from Eberechi Eze ever since his own performance in the North London Derby back in November when he scored a hat-trick against Tottenham Hotspur. I think those two performances have been his best performances in an Arsenal shirt. The third I would put, for me, in my opinion, would be the performance against Kairat Almaty. He did not score, he may have not assisted, but he had an incredible performance, in my opinion. And then maybe his performance against his former side, Crystal Palace, because he scored the only goal that turned out to be the match winner. More of a jumping kind of kick there. So, but those two were incredible. And then Christian Mosquera, for me, what a performance. He came on in the second half, and what a timely intervention for Mikel Arteta to make at that point, because I thought in the backline he settled the nerves that Arsenal may have had in the backline. Then going forward, in terms of his counter press, he did tremendously well. He physically imposed himself on the game, as you would love to see him. And we keep going back at this. For a player that cost Arsenal only £13 million, surely the eyes of Europe must have had their sights on this boy. The eyes of Europe must have had their sights on this boy. Only turned 21. Beautiful, beautiful performance. Now, for as long as I've seen him, there's not many games where I've seen him have a shaky game. Apart from his first half performance away to Newcastle, I thought that was shaky. He started alongside Gabriel Magalhaes. He was not up to beat and he was withdrawn at halftime. And William Saliba came on. A game Arsenal that went on to win. Then, of course, he has had another couple of awkward moments, as you'd have, let's say, a loose pass. Maybe he's almost getting caught out. We saw that recovery against Brentford, because it was him that had been beaten in the first place. Brilliant recovery. So there are those kind of moments. But overall, I think every time he's played, he's looked really, really solid, whether he's been played at centre-back. And I remember when I looked at the starting 11 for the Gunners, once it came out, and Ben White was not on the bench, my first thought was, what if Arsenal have an issue with Urian Timber, where do they look to? Because Ben White, in any case, I would have loved to see Ben White start that game, in my opinion, because first of all, I think Urian Timber has played way too many games that he needs a rest. Unfortunately for Mikel Arteta, until he gets injured or he gets suspended for accumulating maybe yellow cards, or otherwise, he's not going to put him in his starting 11 in a Premier League game. That's the unfortunate bit for me, because first of all, I thought the game against Wolverhampton Wanderers was an opportunity for him to give minutes to Ben White, and today I wouldn't have any eyebrows raised if he had fielded Ben White ahead of Urian Timber. Now, put that to the side. Perhaps he has an injury issue or something, or I do not know what's really happened with Ben White, but he did not make it to the matchday squad. Then, again in the game, I was calling for the cameo of Christian Nogard, not because Tottenham had started finding ground in the game, but because I thought he would have been, you need those legs. He would have been those extra pair of legs that you'd have, come on in that midfield. Because for me, I believe Mikel Arteta overplays Declan Rice and Martin Zubimendi. Every little game that they are playing the entirety of 90 minutes, which in my personal opinion, oftentimes it's cost him. He may not see it that way, but in my humble view, it's cost him. So, but again, it is what it is. So I thought those were really beautiful performances for me, the standout performances for me in as far as the Arsenal side is concerned. Now, let's digest the game itself. First of all, Arsenal were dominant in their performance. They dominated possession. I thought they created more scoring chances, or at least threatening opportunities, the kind of opportunities that you'd have. Now, again, their XG, according to the Premier League website, was 1.93 compared to Tottenham's 0.76. Now, in my opinion, it should have been more. And again, when you look at their attempts on goal or shots on goal, Arsenal had as many as 20, only 7 were on target. So that sort of tells you how forward-thinking they were. A number of times, of course, I was frustrated. The Arsenal fan in me came out, and I was frustrated with the back passes and, getting caught out in possession, as we saw in the equalizer for Tottenham Hotspurs. But overall, they had a brilliant game. They played on the front foot. Now, so I think we had a chance from Leandro Trossard before the deadlock was broken. We had a chance from I think Bukayo Saka. We had another chance. Who was it? Victor Gyökeres. It was a header, but he headed that ball on Radu Dragsson, for whom he was a nightmare for, alongside Mickey van de Ven, in the overall scope of 90 minutes or thereabout. So, and then I think it was it Dijat Space that Bukayo Saka beats, and then he plays in the cutback. Bumba Frederick, hi Bumba Frederick, where are you joining us? Where are you joining us from, my brother? It's a pleasure to have you on the broadcast. So he makes a good run. He had lost that ball, but for some reason, I think it was Dijat Space. He could not clear his lines, and then Saka regains possession, runs by the byline, and makes the cutback for Bukayo Saka. Sorry, for Ebeleche Eze, who has the ability or the time to control that ball, not even brilliantly. I do not think he meant for the ball to rise that high, and then the ball rises and he comes back down and he has his shot onto it to hit the back of the net before Radu Dragsson loses his attention on Victor Gyökeres to come in and sort of intervene. Sadi Muhammad says, hi, Leme from Algerians. Oh, hi, Sadi, how are you doing? Good to have you on the broadcast. Kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel. I'm here. Bumba Frederick says he's from Uganda, Kampala. I'm equally from Kampala, Uganda. So Bumba, kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel, since it's your first time. It's the first time I'm seeing you around here. So, but thank you so much, guys, for the show of kindness and the engagement. Now, like I said, that goal for me, Ebelechi Eze gets all the credit for scoring. Bukayo Saka gets all the credit for his work in providing the assist. But the key man, the person that I look at is very critical in that goal as well as the third wheel in that goal, because it's only two players that participate in scoring a goal. The one who provides the assist and the one that gets the ball to cross the line. But in this particular case, allow me add Victor Gyökeres, because it's his presence in that box that draws the attention of Mickey van de Ven and Radu Dragson, that Ebelechi Eze gets all the time that he needs to put that ball in the back of the net. Now, I think typical Arsenal, when Arsenal scored that goal, I remember the gentleman I was watching the game with somewhere at a public gathering. I told him two things are going to happen. Either Arsenal are going to get the second goal or they're going to concede, and it is not going to take long. Like I predicted, within 20 seconds of restart of that ball, Arsenal went on and conceded. You say Arsenal's chance to take that trophy, it's 50 to 50%. Thank you so much, Boba Frederick. There's a poll question. So again, you can vote in the poll, but also give me your thoughts. I'll be reading them, your reaction, and what you made of Arsenal's performance today. In any case, let me know what your overall sentiment about that game was, in as far as today is concerned. So now, you remember the statement that I started out with? It's a quote that I picked from somebody. I do not know his name, what his name is, but I think he was being featured on TalkSport. He said, Arsenal are their biggest friend, are their biggest enemies and their best friends. In other words, Arsenal's ability to self-sabotage, I think, has been on a very high note this season. When you look at, when you sort of put your magnifying lens into majority of the goals they've conceded in games where they have dropped points, or even if they've gone on to win, you'll find that it's in part self-sabotage. Now, allow me give you some of the examples that I want to make reference to. Go back to the Wolves game. Just recently, self-sabotage. David Raya and Gabriel Magalhaes, an avoidable mistake. David Raya captures that ball, trust me, Arsenal win that game. So self-sabotage, they lose 2 points. Go back to their game against Man United, the equalizer that they concede, self-sabotage. Go to the game against Bournemouth, which they managed to win by 3 goals to 2. But the goal they concede first through Evan Nilsson, self-sabotage. Blind pass from Gabriel Magalhaes. Go back to the 2-2 draw against Sunderland. A bit of self-sabotage in that one. Now, self-sabotage, I mean both players on the pitch and the manager in this particular case for what he does or does not do. So, for me, he needed to make changes in that Sunderland game that he refused to make. Then you go back to the goal they conceded again in the 4-1 victory against Tottenham Hotspur, pretty much like today. That time around, it was Martin Zubimendi that gets caught out of possession in a dangerous area by Joao Paulinho before Richarlison goes on to score. Today, after 22 seconds of restart, after scoring, Declan Rice intercepts a pass. And instead of playing that ball away or putting it on the outside or playing it long ahead to no man's land, he decides to act smart. Acting smart, turning in the direction of William Saliba, who is preoccupied by Randall Colomwani. And then Randall Colomwani, because it's such a short space in between the 3 players, he intercepts the ball. Now, when he intercepts the ball, he makes the run into the box, and Gabriel Magalhaes is preoccupied. One, he has his sights, I think it was on Conor Gallagher, who was in that zone. And then an oncoming Randall Colomwani, then he goes on to score. And it's 1-1, suddenly. And for me, that's self-sabotage. And Declan Rice, you could see, he knew he was guilty. He knew he had made the mistake that cost the goal. So I've given you all the examples in cases where they've committed errors that has cost them points, that has led them to conceding goals, So they are their own worst enemies in as far as things go. Now, of course, they went on to create more other chances in the first half, but they couldn't. The game stayed 1-1. Then, in the second half, Victor Gyökeres, in the second minute of the second half, he scores a banger, a brilliant goal. Now, when Jurgen Timber passes him that ball, and the reason that's why I want to credit him, as soon as that ball hits the back of the net, I'm reminded of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang's goal, similar sort of stunning goal, although for him it was a one-touch take, when Arsenal were beating up against Tottenham Hotspurs during Unai Emery's era. You remember Lucas Torreira and I think Alexander Lacazette also scored in that game. I think Aubameyang scored a brace. For those of you that remember that game, I do not remember, but I think it was the 2018-2019 Premier League season. Thereabout. So beautiful performance from Aubameyang on the day. So as soon as he scores that, it sort of reminds me of that goal. Now, when Jurgen Timber passes that ball to him, of course, there's, I think, a bit of a skip, I think, by Bukayo Saka, or he can't reach it well enough. The pass in itself is a bit heavy. And for a guy that has one of the worst first touches that I've seen in football, Victor Gyökeres, he has a very poor first touch, oftentimes. This time around, he gets it right. He manages to control the ball into a direction and a placement where he really wants it. And then he puts his spin on it and bang, hits the back of the net. Brilliant call. Brilliant call. Bomba says Arsenal's performance was a bit good today. Again, you see that selection of what's a bit good today is because even if you're a neutral fan or if you're an Arsenal fan, as much praise as you want to accord your team, you must be aware that Tottenham were either unlucky or could have gotten something out of that game. Not in terms of a point, but the scoreline could have been much different. And that Arsenal could, because, depending on when a goal goes in, it has an ability to amplify the game or to lower the game in terms of tempo. So, when Arsenal go 2-1 up, Tottenham Hotspurs score a goal. And that goal is ruled out by the referee. I don't remember the exact minute Randall Colomwani scores, but he is judged to have fouled Gabriel Magalhaes in the build-up to that goal. Now, I do not know the exact moment also the referee blows the whistle, whether it's before the ball hits the back of the net or after it's hit the back of the net. Now, in all honesty, and indulge me here, as soon as that ball goes in, for me, it's a goal. When I watch the replay, it reaffirms my earlier conviction that it is a correct call. Whereas Randall Colomwani appears to push Gabriel Magalhaes, I feel that push, for a game that when they go for set pieces is full of pushing and shoving, that is minimal contact. Now, in the defense of the referee, I think for what he judges is because Randall Colomwani pushes Gabriel Magalhaes with both hands. And VAR cannot intervene because they do not think it's a clear and obvious error. All they look at is the referee has made a call or deemed that to be a foul. And therefore, the goal does not stand. So, Randall Colomwani appears to have pushed Gabriel Magalhaes with two hands. And then, Gabriel Magalhaes is already in motion, trying to jump upwards to try and get to the ball. And then that slight push. Now, for me, the reason as why it should count as a goal is because it's a slight push. Yes, there is a push, but it is slight. The question is, if the roles were reversed, would it have been a penalty? That's the question, the big question to ask yourself. That if there was a swap of places and Gabriel Magalhaes is the one behind Randall Colomwani, and in the flight of that ball, he pushes Randall Colomwani, would that have been a penalty? Now, based on the precedent that we saw in midweek the other week, when Chelsea were drawing 2-2 against Leeds United, I would say it would have been a penalty. Now, then the question boils down to, is it reasonable force? Is the force enough to cause the player to be disrupted in motion that then you call it a foul. In my opinion, the push or the contact is there, full contact, but the push looks minimal. In other words, it's not an exaggerated push. It's not an over push. And Gabriel Magalhaes was really, really lucky to get away with that one. Really lucky to get away with that one. And I remember talking, again, having football conversation with those you're watching with the game with, and I said to some gentlemen that, look, if I'm the manager, one, I'm calling you to the sidelines as soon as play is brought to a halt. And I tell you, do not do that again. Because that could have cost us. Because on another day, the referee doesn't call that as a foul, and the goal stands, and then suddenly it's 2-2. Now, if that game is 2-2, it possibly changes the dynamics of the game. It changes the mood about the game. It changes the belief in the game. That one, Tottenham are still in it. That no matter what Arsenal do, Tottenham are ready to counter that. So, for me, it's a critical moment. And I believe it has an impact on the rest of the game in that way. Not because Tottenham were having a good fight. They were fighting a losing battle, by the way. Arsenal were just not being clinical on the other side. Or because I thought they had a ghost player, not ghost, but a player with a very poor performance in Leandro Trossard, in my opinion. He looked sharp in 1 minute and then very poor in the other minutes. So, like that. So, for me, that goal should have stood, in my humble opinion. It should have stood. But judging it from the point of where the referee sees it from, or at least in his school of thought, I'm trying to read between the lines here, is that Rando Kolomwani pushes Gabriel Magalhaes with two hands. Those two hands, I think, are what justifies the referee to call it as a foul. If it's a one-hand sort of slight push, then he's not calling that as a foul. And then, I've told you why VAR can't intervene, because they do not believe it's a clear and obvious error from the referee. So they let it slide. They do not partake in that decision. They let the referee's decision stand. But Arsenal were really, really lucky to get away with that one. Then, Ebeleche Eze scores. A bit of a scrappy goal, because Tottenham Hotspurs somehow fumbled the ball in the area. And in the 61st minute, because it was Bukayo Saka's attempt on goal that can't pull through, Vicario putting in the save, but the ball bounces or falls in the lap of Ebeleche Eze, who strikes it to make it 3-1. Now, when the game is 3-1, again, I still wasn't convinced that Arsenal had won the game. Why? Because I've watched a good chunk of minutes in a game of football to know that it's not over until it is over. I remember saying that all Tottenham Hotspurs needed was that one goal to cause disruption in that Arsenal side and send them into panic mode. And that goal, if it were to come, it needed to come around the 80th minute. And guess what? At some point around that mark, 80-something minutes, early 80s, there, Richarlison almost scored to make it 3-2. A goal line clearance from David Raya is what saves the day before Christian Mosquera kicks that ball out of play. Remember when I said Arsenal were lucky? That is their luck. That ball doesn't cross the line. If it crosses the line, that's when panic mode starts for the Gunners. Because that's when all the pressure that they had washed off their shoulders for the last possibly 20 minutes with that third goal from Eze is washed down the drain. That's when then, in another barrage of attacks, probably they squander it. So, luckily for them, it doesn't go in. And then, in the 4th minute of stoppage time, like I said, in real time, I did not watch the goal, but I've had the chance to see it. Another beautiful goal. Of course, Achai Gray, no match for Victor Yokeres's physique, and brushes him off to the side before firing that ball into the corner, for a beautiful goal. So in the end, it appears like a brilliant performance from the Arsenal, and take nothing away from them. It was a brilliant performance, but it was far from perfect. It was far from perfect. Randall Colom won his goal should have stood, and maybe who knows what would have happened thereafter. On another day, David Raya doesn't save that goal line clearance. Who knows what would have happened? But he was making amends for his own error because he cost the team against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, it's been that turbulent a bit of a season that Arsenal fans, the best they can hope for is for Man City to drop points, whether it's next weekend or any other weekend, because Arsenal have another very difficult task ahead of them. But I'll say this, because I said it in the aftermath of the Wolverhampton Wanderers game. The only way Arsenal put their title chase back on track is if they can beat up against Tottenham Hotspur and Chelsea. Now, they've ticked one box. They have one box to tick. And even then, even if they win the Chelsea game, it's not all done and dusted. It's still far from it. But for me, in winning those two big games, a North London derby and another London derby, is a kind of message you want to send to the fans to sort of calm their nerves. Two, is a kind of message that you want to have in your players who are having doubts in their mind, who are hearing all the noise from the outside world saying they're bottling it and all that kind of, and all those sort of school of thoughts and opinions. That's what you need for them. And then also, you win that game and bring confidence back in that camp. You bring back confidence in the fans, in the players. You sort of change the media narrative a bit. I saw Emmanuel Adebayo, who played for both Arsenal, Tottenham, and then in addition to those two London clubs, he added on Manchester City. And he said he's looked at the fixtures, given what Manchester City's responsibilities are in the remaining games, and he believes Man City will go on to win it. Of course, it will be very harsh for the Arsenal to take it. And I do not know. But I have a theory in my head, and it's only speculative, that if Arsenal were to miss out on this Premier League title and not win the Champions League, Mikel Arteta would resign. I do not know. It's just a school of thought, like I said, But I have a feeling if those two things were to happen, he would step down as Arsenal manager. Or at least he would consider it. Because then perhaps he will deem fate or destiny to have been too harsh on him. Why? Because we're talking about a league title where he's led with 7 points, and if he won a fixture, maybe it goes 9 points, and if he won the next fixture, maybe it goes 12 points or 11 points. And in those occasions, he draws games and he squanders it. Before today's game, if you looked over in the previous 8 games for both Arsenal and Man City, they had both won 3 games, they had drawn 4 games and lost 1. Both teams losing to Man United by 2-0 for Man City and by 3-2 for Arsenal. Arsenal had drawn games against Liverpool, Nottingham Forest, and Brentford, as well as Wolves. There were 4 draws. Their wins had come against Sunderland, Leeds, and I forget the other win. On the side of Man City, one of the draws came against Tottenham Hotspur. The other was against, I think, Brighton. They had a draw against Chelsea. They had a draw against Sunderland. Yes, those were Man City's 4 draws. So their sort of form was uniform. So while Arsenal have had their inefficiencies and they've self-sabotaged, Man City on the other side, as a chasing pack, have equally had their stumbles, because ordinarily a Man City of 2016 2017, 2018, Man City of 2018, 2019 would have already caught up with Arsenal and left them by a mile. A Man City of 2021, 2022 would have left them by a mile, caught up with them and left them by a mile. But we are far from that Man City. And for some reason, and I think this is based on history or pedigree, is that people have now, a good majority of people have more belief in Man City than they do have in Arsenal, that Man City can go ahead and get it over the line. And the reason for that is simple. The reason why it is simple is because Man City have been there and have done it before. They've been in that position before. Go back to 2010, 2011, when they win the Premier League title. Was it 2010, 2011? No, I think it was 2011, 2012. Manchester United were, I think, 8 points. About 8 points ahead of Man City after match day 31. And yet somehow the title went to the wire and Man City won it on final day. Come 2013, 2014, Man City were engaged in the title pursuit. Again, they won it at the expense of Liverpool. Then we saw this almost similar incidents play out against Liverpool 2018, 2019. We saw it against Liverpool 2021, 2022. We saw it against Arsenal 2022, 2023, 2023, 2024, all against Arsenal. So they've done it on about, let me see, about 6 occasions of being in this position, and they've gone ahead to win it. Under Manuel Pellegrini, under Roberto Mancini, and 4 times under Pep Guardiola. So they have that pedigree, and I completely understand why somebody would trust them over they would Arsenal, because they know that for all the times that Arsenal have had a chance to win it, they've self-sabotaged. Whether it was 2022, 2023, whether it was 2023, 2024, whatever the other reasons that you may attach to that, a bit of self-sabotage was an element to it. So, but yeah, a very good performance, perhaps, from Mikel Arteta, who he was being asked today, for example, as why he started Ebelechi Eze. And he said, I could see that he wanted to prove something. He was upset, even with me, because I didn't play him the other day from the beginning, and some of the decisions that I made. I have started to understand how we are going to get the best out of him now. Those are words of Mikel Arteta. So, Arsenal need to show that hunger. They need to show that hunger. They need to prove. And like I've said, until they cross that red line and win it, nobody's going to believe beyond a reasonable doubt. Yes, there will be those that believe that they can do it, but beyond a reasonable doubt, even those that believe that they can do it, there's a small part of them, a tiny bit of them, that believes that it could slip away, especially the fans on the outside, and perhaps in the hearts of a couple of those players, that until they get it over the line, they won't believe beyond a reasonable doubt that they are going to get it over the line. So yeah. So guys, That was the performance. It puts Arsenal 5 points back ahead of Man City, with Man City having a game to spare. But for me, those were the key takeaways. I thought Gabriel William Saliba did well. I thought sometimes Gabriel struggled a bit with the physicality of Randall Kolomwani. I think Randall Kolomwani knew the task ahead. Then Declan Rice, he knows his area, but I thought in the second half he was better. Martins Zubimendi did the best to keep things quite basic. Ebelechi Eze looked sharp. Victor Gyökeres, brilliant. Bukayo Saka caused Tottenham Hotspur all sorts of problems. But I think for me, I've come to the conclusion that this season will go down as Bukayo Saka's worst season in an Arsenal jersey, at least until this point that I've watched of him. It's just not happening for him. No matter how much he tries, there's some moments that you see on a Bukayo Saka that is in his headspace, in his moment. That's a goal, that's an assist. But a couple of times I've seen him fire the blanks. I've seen him, literally fire it into somebody or the goalkeeper or something, But anyways, it is what it is. Moving on from that Arsenal performance, perhaps I think we've given it the time that it needed for its review. Moving on. In the other games that were played earlier on, Liverpool left it late against Nottingham Forest as they won that game by 0-0. A very dull and boring performance. I did not get to see the first half, but I remember once I got to watch the game, I was like, oh, thank God I didn't even stress myself about watching this first half. I watched the second half and it was that kind of boring game. It lacked spark. It lacked key moments that you could really, really count on, really. And then they swept it away with McAllister's goal, for which in the build-up, there were two players, Liverpool players, in an offside position, in Virgil van Dijk and Hugo Ekitike, although the conclusion came back that perhaps it was Hugo Ekitike that was in an offside position, but Virgil van Dijk, who makes contact with the ball, he had a Nottingham Forest defender who was boot, and I say boot. When I say boot, I mean the boot, as in your shoe, was marginally onside. So the goal stood and Liverpool won the game by 0-0. So it's the kind of game that wasn't worthy of a man of the match performance. But if you maybe wanted to give it one, maybe you'd afford it to Stefan Ortega of Nottingham Forest, even though he ended up conceding. So, but brilliant 3 points from Liverpool. For Liverpool, they get to move to 45 points. It's up there for Man United to do it all tomorrow, to sort of separate themselves from Liverpool and Chelsea, who are also on 45 points, just like them, Man United. So if Man United can win away to Everton, then it takes them to 48 points, and then they're back in the top four and, within reach of Aston Villa, who shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw yesterday against Leeds United, with Tammy Abraham scoring the equalizer in that one. So really, I'm thinking to myself, if you're Man United, who are in 5th place, by the way, that's a must-win game. When you win it, you go within about 3 points behind Aston Villa, so you go within 3 points behind Aston Villa. So really quite the kind of it's quite the kind of what should I call it? The kind of run in you'd want at this pursuit of the top four. And then in the other game also, we had Crystal Palace beating up against the 10-man Wolverhampton Wanderers by 1-0. That goal scored in the 90th minute by Ivan Guessand. They are on loan from Aston Villa, while Krejcik, I don't know how to pronounce his name right, got the red card. Now, Wolverhampton Wanderers missed a penalty from Al-Kodare. They should have scored from the penalty spot, but I think it was Al-Kodare who missed that penalty. Excuse me. Villarreal against Valencia. is 2-1 at halftime, by the way. That's an update from the Spanish La Liga. Then, meanwhile, there's also a game in the Italian Serie A where AC Roma are leading Cremonese by goal to nil. Earlier on, AC Milan lost to Parma at home by goal to nil, while Atlanta beat against Napoli by 2-1. So anyways, we'll get into those results a bit later on. But I was telling you, Recordare missed a penalty in that one. So it stayed 0-0, and then Ivan Gosant got all the 3 points for Crystal Palace. Crucial 3 points. They really needed those 3 points to move to 35 points. And, just a couple of days ago, when Crystal Palace fans were chanting that he should get sacked, he reminded them to stay humble and remember who brought them thus far, who won them their first major piece of silver. Now, I don't know whether football fans are impatient or they are ungrateful. I don't want to think they're ungrateful. I would want to think they're more impatient than they are grateful. Than they are ungrateful. Because tell me why tell me why a manager that guided them to their first major piece of silverware that they had never dreamed of in winning the FA Cup last season is the same manager they want to see exit the club as soon as yesterday. The same manager that guided them to the triumph of the Community Shield at the start of the season when they beat Liverpool on post-match penalties and proceeded a 2-2 draw. Yes, I understand a lot has not gone their way this season, but he equally has had a lot to deal with. Losing his captain in McKay to Man City in January, he had been destabilized in the summer on deadline day with a move to Liverpool that fell through. Jean-Philippe Mateta wanting to leave the club and things like that. And they were never able to replace McKay in January. So I think he deserves more credit than perhaps some Crystal Palace fans give him. So, but yeah. And then in the other game, a bit of a surprise result for me. Fulham went to the Stadium of Light and beat Sunderland by 3-1. Leafy scored a penalty in the 76th minute that turned out to be a mere consolation for the hosts. But Raul Jimenez scored in the 54th minute and the 61st minute penalty, as well as Alex Iwobi in the 85th minute, with Harry Wilson there, very crucial in that game, walking away with the man of the match accolade. I mean, I did not get to watch this game, but the scoreline is indicative of what would pass for, I think, a brilliant performance from Fulham. Perhaps. Hello, Mr. Triber. Big win for Arsenal. Congratulations, man. Thanks so much. Pedri, how are you doing, my brother? How is it going? Yeah, I've been looking for you. And I wanted two things. The two things I wanted to hear from you, but also congratulations upon your victory. Barcelona, they are winning by 3-0 earlier on today against Levante. I did not get to watch that game because where I was watching the Liverpool game from, they decided not to show the Barcelona game. Sometimes, some of these people can be very disappointing, but it is what it is. But yeah, I wanted to pick your mind on the Barcelona performance overall, what you made of it, and your key takeaways, and then also to give me the sentiment of Atletico Madrid fans about Diego Simeone for all the resources he's been given. And their sort of haphazard performances of where they win convincingly today and then tomorrow they are like a shadow of themselves and things like that. So first, give us your snapshot view about Barcelona and their game against Levante. A beautiful win over there. Fermin Lopez, Frankie de Jong and Beno scoring in that one. Give us a snapshot. But then after that, I just want to understand the sentiments around Atletico de Madrid fans, because I'm sure if it were any other club other than Atletico de Madrid, for whom they have had a manager that long and it's been accorded, fair enough, the kind of resources that you really want at a club of their stature and size, what are the kind of sentiments within the Atletico de Madrid, fan base? Have they grown fed up of Diego Simeone? Do they think they should make a change, or it's a ride or die, sort of Romeo and Juliet kind of thing? It's more like a church vow until death does do us part. What's the sentiment there? Thank you so much, Pedri. So Pedri says a very good performance. We played very good football, very possessive with the ball. Good performance overall. Very pleased. Highlights: Beno, Frankie, and Joao Cancelo are very impressed. Joao Cancelo, always a brilliant player. Always a brilliant player. Really, I mean, I remember watching him at Man City play all sorts of positions, whether it was right back, whether it was winger, whether it was midfield, and he never looked unimpressive on any given day in any of those positions. Perhaps I don't know whether to credit Pep Guardiola, but I mean, he always looked brilliant. So, and I have no doubts of him sort of having an okay career with Barcelona for as long as it lasts. Especially looking at the Barcelona side that went on to sign players like Andreas Christensen, that are, a Barcelona side that at one point decided to go and sign Oriol Romeo, a Barcelona side that not too far back went and decided to sign an Adama Traore, in that sort of sense, really, in that angle. But thank you so much for that. You say Atletico Madrid have spent too much and get practically get anyone now, but they do realistically have the players to win the league. Simeone football is very old-fashioned, doesn't attack much. I do not like him too. So, yes, you don't like him and you've described him, the kind of football. But more importantly, I want to understand the sentiment within Atletico Madrid fans. What do they think about him? Do they think it's time to, say he should go? By the way, Mr. Tribe, sorry for not being here for the past 2 days. I was a bit tired. Sorry, Mr. Tribe. Oh, it's quite, that's understandable. I remember yesterday morning, that was Saturday. Of course, we've now crossed into Monday. It's now 23rd of February. But on Saturday morning, we did not do our morning broadcast because there was no power. It rained quite heavily and power went off. So no power usually means no Wi-Fi. So we missed our broadcast. But we did the late night broadcast, and that's when we spoke about Atletico Madrid a bit, and that's when I'd hoped to, catch your sentiment, but you're unavailable. I only hoped that you had been okay. I remember we're having an engagement with some people that's making reference to you as, our go-to person when it comes to sort of the deeper insights when we want to understand of what is happening with certain clubs within the Spanish La Liga there. So, but anyways, we'll wait and see. Thank you. So it's all good on that front. So, I mean, those were the results from the Premier League in as far as Super Sunday is concerned. So tomorrow there's one game, and that's between Manchester United playing away to Everton. Anyways, elsewhere in the Spanish La Liga, Getafe lost to Sevilla by 0-0. Sevilla were the away team. Barcelona beat Levante by 3-0. Like I said, Marc Beno, you had Frankie de Jong and Fermin Lopez, the goal scorers in that one. Really beautiful performance. Like Pedri says, it was for them. Then Villarreal, as we speak, that game has returned for the second half and is still 2-1 in favor of Villarreal against Valencia, while Celta Vigo beat up against Mallorca by 2-0. Pedri says they want him out. They had enough of his conservative football. They want to push for the league title for a club with this magnitude. They need stability over results, not a 5-0 win and then a 4-0 loss. I completely understand because that's been the nature of Atletico Madrid for the better part of this season. They can win heavily and then lose heavily and then draw. It's been, it's been there, up and about, very unconvincing, blowing hot and cold at the same time, really, if I were to describe them. But then also the question, the big question is, and perhaps again, I'm going to request for your input on this one. when you draw the lenses within the cohort of managers that are in Spanish football, whether upcoming, whether sort of quite proven, the Kike Sanchez or Flores, whether you're looking at uh, it's called what? I forget his name. Formerly at Real Sociedad. But when you look at the managerial market within the Spanish La Liga, and maybe even if it is beyond the Spanish La Liga, the question is, what kind of manager do you think, or do you see as walk into that Atletico de Madrid dressing room for, where, where Diego Simeone has been since 2013 until now, coming on to, it's already 13 years, coming on to 15 years, possibly thereabout. Who among some of the Spanish managers within the Spanish La Liga that you think can walk in? Because across board, there's been mentions of the likes of Andoni Iraola. Of course, we know about his work at FC Bournemouth. I do not know or think that they would go in for managers like Luis Enrique. Then I do not know what their sentiments would be about going in for a foreign manager, because usually Spanish teams have been known for having majority of sort of domestic coaches, even though you've had a couple of like the likes of Carlo Ancelotti, Jose Mourinho come in there, Diego Simeone, who is an Argentine, of course, the Mauricio Pochettino, formerly at Espanyol, who is an Argentine, but relatively there's I think let me call them Spanish-speaking managers, and by Spanish-speaking, I mean Mexican descent, or that sort of, sort of line, so to speak. You say Emmanuel Agcheli. I think Andoni Iraola has very good quality for Atletico de Madrid. He has had experience with Rayo Vallecano. Another option for me is Michel Sanchez of Girona, a very high intelligence, second in 2023 on the table. Yeah, I remember that Girona side that was heaped with all sorts of praises, and it's very unfortunate that this season has possibly not gone for them the way they would have hoped for. But yeah, I completely understand. And thank you so much for that input. So anyway, let's wait and see if Atletico Madrid will be bold enough to make that change, should they deem it necessary, if they think it is even necessary in the first place. Because sometimes the fans want something else, and yet on the other side, the bosses of these particular clubs, are thinking something entirely different about a particular manager. Anyways, moving on. In the German Bundesliga today, you had Freiburg beat up against Borussia Mönchengladbach by 2-1. St. Pauli beat up against Werder Bremen by similar scoreline 2-1, while Heidenheim and VfB Stuttgart ended in a 3-all draw. I mean, we're talking about a Stuttgart side that thrashed Celtic by 4-1. Then in the Italian Serie A, Genoa beat Torino by 3-0. Atalanta beat Napoli by 2-1. AC Milan lost to Parma. I think this is their only second loss this season in as far as the Italian Serie A is concerned. They lost by 0-0, while AC Roma, as we speak, in the 74th minute are leading Cremonese by 1-0. In the French League 1, Auxerre lost to Stade Reims by 3-0. Lille beat Angers by 0-0. Beat on Nots, the one that Ugandans call Nantes, lost to Le Havre by 2-0. Nice and Lorient, that one shared the spoils in a 3-all draw, while Strasbourg beat up against Lyon by 2-1. So that's how things look like. Of course, in the Italian Serie A, Inter Milan are still leading the pile in as far as the standings are concerned, with 10 points ahead of a second place AC Milan, because Inter Milan have 64 points, AC Roma have 54. It looks like they are on course to win the Scudetto after losing it to Napoli last season. and Napoli are down in third place with 50 points. That's 14 points behind or adrift. AC Roma are fourth with 50 points. If they win today's game, Juventus 46. Sixth place is Como with 45 points, and Atlanta in seventh place with 45 points. Atlanta, I think, did they part ways with Christian Chivu? No, not Christian Chivu. Ivan Juricic. Yes, Ivan Juricic. You said Girona, since that high finish, sold its stars. Alex Garcia to Leverkusen. I don't know how to even pronounce that name. Dovbyok to Roma. Miguel Guiterres to Napoli. Mikel Sanchez can do wonders with high quality players. No offense to Girona. I think even Savinho was in the cohort of that group of players, and he went to Manchester City. Savinho, really. So yeah, but thank you so much for that insight. Yeah, it is true that usually when these kinds of mid-table teams or relatively bottom teams come and have a very significant performance in one single season, they go on to lose their majority of their players. You remember back in 2016 when Leicester City won the Premier League title when nobody expected it under Claudio Ranieri. Riyad Mahrez went to Manchester City. Subsequently, the likes of Danny Drinkwater went to Chelsea. N'Golo Kante went to Chelsea. You had players move on. Arsenal had wanted to sign Jamie Vardy, but they never got through it. But they lost a couple of significant players in that cohort. And suddenly, today as we speak, Leicester City, things are not going really, really well for them. They're not going really well for them. Obviously, the owner died in a helicopter crash, and his son had to take over, and it's not been the same since. So here's a joke for the weekend. Osasuna beat Real Madrid. Now, Pedri, I know Real Madrid lost, but you do not have to gloat too much. I mean, I watched the game, and to be honest, Osasuna were deserved winners. They were deserved winners. They had a very brilliant first half. In the second half, not as brilliant, but they did just enough to stay in the game. They did not give away too many chances, and you can see when Kylian Mbappe scores, there's an offside for what would have been the equalizer. Then Vini scores, and then the way was it Raul Garcia takes that chance to score. The way he sends Raul Asensio, is it Raul Asensio, the defender, to the cleaners? I mean, that was a brilliant performance. Then you had Budimir. He scored from the penalty spot and hit the upright. He just had a good game. Osasuna, to be honest, to be fair, in all fairness, Osasuna were the better side. I didn't watch it because it was at 7:30, but I thought it's 8. Oh, sorry about that. But anyway, maybe that would have even made you more eager to join yesterday's broadcast. Yes, Asensio got sent to the shops. I mean, beautiful performance because I was watching that game alongside the game between Borussia Dortmund and RB Leipzig. That one ended 2-2. And then also keeping tabs on the West Ham and Bournemouth game that ended in a goalless draw. Unfortunately, this weekend, you are not here to, go through the predictions with me. So I do not know whether I credit myself the few points that I managed to gather or we skip it because I didn't have any perfect score. No, I had one perfect score. That is Crystal Palace beating Wolves 1-0. Then an Arsenal win. The prediction had been 2-1. I had predicted for a Liverpool win. No, I'd predicted a draw, a 2-2 draw between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest, not a Liverpool win. I'd predicted a Manchester City win against Newcastle. I think it was 2-1 or 3-1. I think I went 3-1. I need to find those predictions online because I put them on my X. But yeah, I do not know. What do you suggest we do? You say West Ham had 30 shots and 0 goals. I mean, to be honest, the reason that's why I predicted a draw for that game, even though he went for a 1-all draw, is because their last 5 meetings had ended in draws. And so I decided, why not? It looked destined for a draw. In any case, even though West Ham are fighting relegation, there's not much that they've done differently, really, against some of the sides. And then you say, how many points do you have from this weekend? Let's do 70%, so 30% discount. Let me try. Let me quickly find all my predictions from this weekend. And I see because I put them out. Yes, my Aston Villa, I went 2-1 against Leeds. That one ended in a draw. Brentford, I went 3-2 win for Brentford over Brighton. Brighton beat them by 2-0. So in those first 2 games, 0 points. Chelsea had gone for 3-1 win for Chelsea against Burnley. It ended in a 1-all draw. What a disappointing game. West Ham, Bournemouth, a 1-all draw. Man City to beat Newcastle 3-1. It ended 2-1, so not perfect score. Crystal Palace 1, Wolves 0-0, so that was a perfect score. Nottingham Forest 2, Liverpool 2, ended 1-0 in favor of Liverpool, so no point there. Sunderland to beat Fulham 2-1. Fulham won that one 3-1. Arsenal to beat Tottenham 2-1. Arsenal won 4-1, so clearly you can see that. And then for tomorrow's game, I went Man United to win 3-1. I mean, I feel like changing my prediction for that one, but it is what it is. So clearly, it's not many points. In any case, so far, I would have got 2 points from the Arsenal game, 3 points from the Crystal Palace game, so that makes it 5. Another 2 points from the Man City game, that makes it 7. And that would have been it. Oh, no. And then an extra 2 points from the West Ham game. So 9 points. Basically, I would have gathered 9 points. Basically, that's it. So I do not know. That's how poor the weekend was for me. I mean, 9 points. Can you imagine? Anyway, perhaps 9 points is better than I had done in the previous weekend. Anyways, we'll leave it at that. But yeah, with that victory, Barcelona are back to the summit of the standings in the Spanish La Liga. So again, football. Sometimes football feels as unfair as you can have it. That's how it feels like. So you get 6 points instead. That's good, right? I'll take the 6 points. But let's wait for the result from tomorrow's game as well. Man United will complete match day 27 with their trip away to Everton at the Hill Dixon Stadium. So Barcelona now are back within a point lead against Real Madrid. So yeah, the title race is still wide open. It's still wide open there in the Spanish La Liga, especially for those two sides, because Barcelona are now 10 points ahead of Villarreal. So I'll give you 6 points because I need to win 2, but it's my fault for skipping. I need to win. All right. Anyways, Pedri, guys, for the rest of the conversation, why don't you allow us have it tomorrow morning? Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. There, East African time. So it's been a pleasure, Pedri. Thank you so much for being with us. What's his name? Oh, come on. I'm forgetting the name. Yes, Bomba Frederick, thank you so much. We will. Thank you so much. Sadi Muhammad from Algeria, thank you so much for having been part of the broadcast. Always a pleasure. Pedri, Enoch Isaac. Oh, very late, my brother. Hi, Enoch. Hope you've had a wonderful weekend, even though you're not a football fanatic. I hope you're enjoying basketball, if there's any, or cricket, because the World Cup, the T20 World Cup is on, and those gigantic 8. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe did wonders out there. You're late, Enoch Isaac. Sorry, mate. Get out. So maybe Isaac can go and watch the World Cricket, the World Cup T20 for the cricket. Sri Lanka still in there. Australia were sent home. Zimbabwe are still in there. They are the surprise package of the tournament. Italy were sent home. India, of course, are still in it. Of course, England, New Zealand, so it is what it is. Oh, oh boy. Anyway, Pedri is the usual suspect. Pedri, Isaac is a friend of mine. We are well acquainted. So have a blessed night, guys. Let's catch up tomorrow for the morning broadcast. Bye-bye for now.